Good afternoon and welcome to my home kitchen. Ni hao shui sheng. I'm glad you guys could join me today, friends and students. My name is Chris Ferguson. I'm our study abroad advisor at High Point University, and what some of you may know is that on the side I like to cook, and I've been doing many different things, especially pastry work. As you can see, we're actually here not in my kitchen but so much my bakery. So we're going to be talking today about some of my time when I was living overseas many years ago and blending a little bit of my love of culture with cooking. I, as many of you may know, had spent some time living in China. After I graduated from college, went to High Point University many years ago, I had the opportunity to move to China, and I lived in a small city in southwest China called Kunming. Kunming was a very different place than what I've been used to just about anywhere else that I've ever been. It was a big city for me. It was a smaller city for China's sake, but it was about 7 million people, lived in a fifth floor walk-up. Definitely had a different experience than what I was used to. Students, the size of High Point, the town, up until the point I moved to China, that was the biggest town that I had ever lived in. And so seeing this and living in this was a very different experience. And one of the things that I learned while I was living overseas was that the culture, and especially the food culture, was very different than anything I was ever used to. Up until that point, I loved cooking. I've always loved cooking. My whole family cooks very well, and that's something that we've all kind of taken a passion in our own ways. But now I was seeing food and cooking in a very different way. The preparation was very different than what I was used to, and also the way people ate was very different than what I was used to. When I moved to China, it was one of the first times I had really ever been outside of America. And I was expecting to sit down, have a Chinese meal like I was used to here in America, be something like General Tso's chicken or sesame chicken with a side of pork fried rice and an egg roll. That's what I was expecting. That's what I was excited for. I didn't grow up eating a lot of Chinese food, so in college, when I discovered what American Chinese food was, I fell in love with it. I get to China, and actually my first meal was not Chinese food. My first meal in China was day one. I was walking around with my roommate and another expat living in the city. We had things we had to do, a lot of tasks. Go to a bank, open up a bank account so we could set up Wi-Fi so we could pay rent, so we could just do life living in China. And so we had to eat something very quick. So instead of my General Tso's chicken and fried rice, I had McDonald's. I don't even like McDonald's in America, let alone living overseas. And so that would not have been my first choice, but that's what we had to do. We ate McDonald's. It was very different even than what we have McDonald's here in America, but it was my first experience into Chinese food. All day I craved General Tso's chicken. And at the end of that day, when we sat down for dinner, about 13 of us around a table, I realized that you don't get General Tso's chicken with a side of pork fried rice and an egg roll in China. So we had white rice, mi fan, with every meal. It was quite a bit of time before we actually had fried rice. Chow fan was not something we could find easily in my immediate neighborhood, so I would have to rely on other places to get that. And it turns out that the school that I attended was quite a distance away from the center of the city where I lived, and that's where I had my first fried rice. I was with one of the students there. He took me to what became his favorite restaurant just outside of the campus gate. And we had chicken fried rice. My first fried rice experience in China. So today, we're going to make chicken fried rice. We're going to make it kind of the Chinese way. I put out a list of ingredients. If you're interested in cooking along, please feel free to do so. Pretty easy setup. We need a stove with either a wok or a nonstick skillet. I'm using a saute pan today. You'll need chicken for protein, some vegetables that we're going to cook into the dish. Onions is staple in fried rice. You're going to find that in just about every type of fried rice. Today we've got carrots, green onions, mushrooms. You do need eggs. Today we're going to be cooking for somewhere between 2 to 4 people. I've got 2 eggs to be able to make that dish. You do need rice, a staple with it. Now rice for fried rice is leftover rice. So I cooked this yesterday. I'm using jasmine rice, a white long grain rice. You could use basmati, you could use brown rice, you can use anything, probably not instant rice, but anything that you have cooked a day before. I'll talk more about how to cook rice a little bit later on. I know some people ask questions about that. A couple other ingredients. We need salt, pepper. We need a ingredient that a lot of people probably don't have at home, kind of a little bit controversial here in the United States, MSG. You don't have to use MSG, but if you have it, it's going to add a good umami flavor to it, and it's going to make it taste more like what you have in a restaurant. And then you need soy sauce. I'm going to be using dark soy sauce today. Dark soy sauce has a little bit thicker and darker of a flavor. It's not as much sodium, so it's not going to be quite as salty as regular or light soy sauce. Light soy sauce is just what we call soy sauce here in the United States. Sorry, I don't have a little container of it, but this is probably the most common that you'll find, kikkoman. If you are gluten-free, you can definitely use tamari, or you can choose coconut aminos. Coconut aminos also is not made with soy, so if you have a soy allergy, this is a good option. You got mine at Trader Joe's. They all do the same thing. If you use regular soy sauce, you just want to add a little bit more in. So let's get cooking. We are going to need to heat up our pan. We're going to start with vegetables though, get that prep out of the way, and then we're going to move on to the rest of it. So I'm going to start with carrots. I am actually not going to peel my carrots right now. You don't have to, you can. We only need about a half cup of them. So I'm going to go pretty quickly at my carrots. And I'm going to break them down. If you are not used to chopping vegetables, this rolls. To be safe, if you hold it flat, you can actually cut off an end. Then you can roll it and now it's flat and it's not going to move. That's why I'm not peeling it, because I'm going to cut off the sides. Last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to dice it into small little cubes. Again, we don't need a lot of carrots for this recipe. You can see this is just a small amount. I'm going to do a little bit more of my carrot. You can see as I am cutting this, I'm keeping my fingers away from where I'm actually cutting. The last thing we want to do is cut ourselves, so we want to practice some good knife skills there. And sorry, my phone is actually ringing right now. It'll stop here in just a minute. We are going to set this aside so that we can use these carrots later. I just have a bench scraper. Helps me move my produce over. Leftover scraps, I'm just going to throw them in. We don't need those. Thank you for coming. Move on to an onion. A lot of people ask how to chop an onion. Easiest thing to do is to take off the top, leave the root intact. You don't want to cry when you have an onion. You want a newer onion to use, and you want to keep that root there. It's going to help you to keep from crying. Cut it right in half. We're only going to use half an onion today, so we're going to move that away. And I'm actually going to just peel off the outer layer. Here's where we're going to get tricky. If you want to hold your knife, a good sharp knife is going to help you with this. I'm going to take my fingers and I'm going to hold them as a claw, and I'm just going to cut through my onion just a little bit towards the root, but not all the way through. I'm going to do that one more time. Turn my onion. I'm going to go up and down. So now we have just a few cuts in it, but watch how easy this is to dice. So now we have our diced onions. Just like before. We're actually not going to need all of these. We're going to set them aside. Cut up our green onions. For green onions, we actually do not need the very end, so we're going to just cut those off. And we're just going to run our knife through them pretty quickly. Again, a good sharp knife is going to help with this. I've got 2 green onions. We're going to use both the greens and some of the whites. And that's good for now. We're going to set that aside for later. And the last thing we've got is onions. Or I'm sorry, mushrooms. For mushrooms, I'm just going to take off the very end of the tip, and I'm just going to make nice little slices. I'm going to do these pretty thin so that they cook up pretty quickly. Thing with fried rice is it's a pretty quick dish, so we don't need too thick of cuts so that they actually will cook in a pretty good, quick time. We'll do one more. And that is it. So now we have our vegetables prepped. The last thing we need to do is our chicken. So I'm going to clean off my board here. Today I'm using boneless, skinless chicken breasts. You can use any protein that you want, but this here, I'm sorry, chicken thighs. This here is going to cook pretty quickly. It's going to stay juicy. Again, we want it to cook pretty quickly, so we're going to actually cut this in pretty small sections. I'm going to cut off just a little bit of the fat. We don't need quite so much fat in the dish today. We need somewhere between 4, maybe 6 ounces. 4 ounces of meat is about the size of a deck of playing cards. So we actually only, I think, need one of these. Turn around, we're just going to cube it up. Okay, so we've got enough chicken there for our dish. I'm going to wash my hands real quick, and then we're going to get on with the rest of the prep. I've got some water here, so I'll be right back. Okay, so now let's go ahead and get cooking. We're going to turn our pan on. If you're cooking at home and if you haven't had everything prepped yet, go ahead and start your stove for the time being. I'm using a gas stove here. So we're going to get it turned on. I'm going to turn it to about a medium to medium-high heat. I have a non-stick skillet here. Any skillet is going to work. We want to go ahead and get that on the heat so that it starts to warm up. In Chinese cooking, you're going to see pretty much only a wok being used for most preparations. Here in America, woks are not the easiest thing to use because they require a lot of gas, a lot of flames to come up around the wok to heat it up. Woks heat very quickly. My skillet, and most of our skillets, have a ring at the bottom that helps it to maintain its heat, but it takes longer to warm up. So we're going to go with a little bit higher of a heat than maybe you might be used to, but we're not going to cook it quite as high and hot as you would with a wok. If you have a wok, that's great, but most of us have electric or gas stoves where you're not going to get the huge flames, so we're going to keep that kind of low, going with a medium heat. Continue prepping the food that you have. If you need to continue with that, we're going to go ahead and get just a little bit of vegetable oil in the pan. You can use vegetable oil, you can use olive oil, you can use coconut oil if you would like. About a tablespoon or so is all we need. And we're going to need to start getting our chicken cooked. I started with prepping everything because once we get this cooking, especially once the chicken or the protein is finished cooking, the rest of the process is going to go very quickly. So we want to make sure we have everything set. We call that mise en place. Have everything ready to go in its place so that we can put it into the pan when we need to. We don't have to wait on prepping our vegetables in order to get it in and then burn or overcook our food. So we're going to start with the chicken. My oil is getting hot. You can tell it's ready to go when you see it start to shimmer a little bit inside of it. So if it looks like the ocean and the waves are kind of coming up onto shore and you see the ripples, that's what you want your oil to look like. It's kind of hard to see that here, but if you look close, you can see a little bit of the ripples. Into this, I'm going to add my chicken. And again, I'm going to wash my hands because I just touched the raw chicken. I'll be right back in a second, but you can go ahead and see that that chicken is starting to cook. Because we cut this chicken small, it's going to cook faster. So we're just going to take a high heat resistant spatula of any kind. If you don't have that, a wooden spoon would work great. And we're just going to start moving that around. let's talk safety of food for just a quick second. When you're cooking meats, you want to make sure that they are cooked to the proper temperature. Most meat is either going to be cooked to 145 degrees or 165 degrees. If you're cooking seafood, especially shellfish, you want to make sure that it's no longer opaque or clear in the middle. You want to make sure that it's completely opaque is the actual word. You want to make sure it's cooked all the way through. It changes color like shrimp. You want to make sure that it actually turns the color it used to be fully. With chicken, it's a little bit harder to see because we're going to start to get a little bit of a sear on the outside of it. You want to make sure that it gets to 165 degrees. That's white meat, dark meat, it doesn't matter. If you're using pork, you can do the same thing. You want to get that up above 145. If you're using steak, 145 or higher is what you want. When it's cooked this small or cut this small, you're going to be able to tell when it's really seared all the way through, inside and out. While that's going, I'm going to whip up 2 eggs. Use just a wooden fork here. Start to get that broken up. I'm going to add into that just a little bit of salt. Not much, just a little pinch. And I am going to be controversial. I'm going to use MSG, so I'm going to use just a pinch of MSG as well. Chicken is finishing up. I'm going to season it just a little bit with some salt and a little bit of pepper. And we're going to take that chicken, because it's now cooked. I'm going to go ahead and take it out of the pan. Set that aside. We don't need that quite yet. Now we're going to do our vegetables. These are things that are going to season our pan or bring flavor to the pan and the oil. So I'm adding a little bit more vegetable oil. I'm going to go in with my onions. I need about a half cup, so I'm not going to use everything I cut. We're going to put the rest away. Have that maybe tomorrow with an omelet or something else. Into the onions, I'm just going to put a little bit of salt, and that's going to be it. We're going to let those start to cook down just a little bit so they soften. While that's cooking, let's talk about rice real quick. Some people have asked how to cook rice. There's 2 main methods. You can use a rice cooker, which I'll be honest with what I did for this time. It saves a lot of time. It's easy to do. The rule of thumb when cooking rice is about 1 cup of water to 1 cup of rice. Put that in your rice cooker and then add an extra half cup of water. If you want to do it on stovetop, not in a rice cooker, you want a small pan, same amount of rice, about this is a cup and a half of rice with a cup and a half of water, and then an extra half cup of water for evaporation. Put that on stove, bring it up to a boil, put a lid on it, reduce your stove temperature down to low, let it simmer for 8 to 10 minutes, don't touch it. Turn off your stove, let it sit for another 10 minutes. Then you can lift your lid. If you lift your lid before that, that steam is going to evaporate out of it. It's not going to cook your rice properly. You need to let it sit for that time. So 8 to 10 minutes of cooking on a simmer after a boil, and then let it sit. Don't touch it. Another 10 minutes. Take your lid off. Then you can fluff it with a fork, and this is what you're left with, just like this. We're going to need about 2 cups of rice. It is day-old rice. Cool that within 90 minutes and put it in your fridge. You don't want bacteria to grow on anything. You want this to be safe, so make sure 90 minutes it's in the fridge, cooling. Our onions now are about done, so I'm going to add into that the rest of my veggies, which is the carrots and the mushrooms. If you have frozen peas and you want to use those with this, that's perfect. Don't add them yet. We're going to add those towards the end. They're ready to eat. They're just frozen. We just need to warm them up. you lose a little bit of carrots, it's okay. We can clean that up a little bit later on. This is cooking, so you get to do what you want to do. It's going to be a mess. That's okay. We understand that. Just have fun with it. Use any vegetables that you'd like. Leeks are very good in this. Bok choy is good in this. If you want to add cabbage, you can. That's a little bit more northern. You want to add what you are interested in eating. You can see it's starting to take on a little bit of color. At this point in time, you can also start to really smell it. It smells good. We got carrots, mushrooms, onions going in the pan. We don't need to cook these until they're soft. We just want to make sure that they are cooked through and get a little bit of color. Let them go for another minute. So I talked about my friend in China taking me to get fried rice. One of the things I learned about that experience, first time he took me to get fried rice was on his birthday. What I learned in China is that on your birthday, it's typical for you to take your friends out to celebrate with you. So he invited me out for lunch. We went to a fried rice restaurant. I had yet to have fried rice in China at all. Didn't even know if I'd ever have fried rice. I learned that fried rice is kind of your leftover meal. It's perfect for this time. All of us are at home. It's COVID-19. We can't go outside of our home. We're trying to find what we have in our pantry. This is a pantry food item. Anything you have leftovers, even if it's leftover cooked proteins, use that, put it in. You just don't have to cook it before, you just have to warm it back up. This is all the leftover food. So we get to this restaurant outside the gate. I had no idea what it was. He knew that I was interested in fried rice because we had talked. He was Chinese. He wasn't from the town that we were living in. But he was there studying. He was actually a freshman. It was his first year on campus. He took me out and smiled. And I was like, what are we doing? Where are we going? He's like, don't worry. You sit down at a table. I'll come find you. I'm going to order our food. So he orders his food. His comes out first. It was just egg fried rice. Then comes my dish. And he was grinning. He knew I wanted fried rice. He knew I'd get to have it living in China. So that was what he treated me to on his birthday, chicken fried rice. Chicken fried rice is an easy dish. Any fried rice is an easy dish for a quick lunch. Turned out that would become our staple. That's where he and I would go and get lunch quite frequently. But you don't really find it a lot of times in restaurants in China because it is such a leftover dish. This is more something that you'll find at home. So our vegetables now have color. They're now cooked. We're going to add in our eggs. This is just like cooking an omelet. Our eggs are whipped. I'm going to add them to the pan. And I'm not going to do anything for a minute. I'm going to let that egg start to cook here in the pan just until it starts to set at the bottom. Not completely cooked, but just until it's set a little bit. You can see it's starting to cook up around the sides. Now is when I'm going to go ahead and start stirring it. But I don't want to stir too much yet because I want some chunks of egg in my actual rice dish. I want to be able to taste that egg in it as well. Starting to smell good, I do believe. My brother is here filming for us today. He probably thinks it smells good too. He's going to get a nice little lunch after we're finished. Okay, the egg is now cooked. We're almost done with the dish. Last thing we're going to do, we're going to add our chicken back in. Give that a quick stir. We're going to add in about 2 cups of rice. This is more rice than what you really need, so we're not going to put all of it in. This is cooled out of my fridge. The reason that we use leftover rice and not fresh rice, if you've ever tried this and you've done it with fresh rice, you realize that the rice just sticks together. It becomes almost like glue in the pan. You don't want that. That's not good food. That's not going to be true fried rice. We want that rice to be completely broken up. The fridge actually dries out your food, and it's perfect for this, drying out the rice. So we're going to take our spatula. We're just going to break up some of those chunks that are in there with the rice. We're now going to add in some additional flavorings. We're going to add in just a little bit more MSG. I'm going to go about a little over 1/3 of a teaspoon. I know I'm doing this by eye. I'm not doing it with actual spoons, but about 2/3 of a teaspoon. So if you have a dessert spoon, it's going to be just the tip of it, and that's it. Add just a little bit of salt, about the same amount. It's going to be about 2/3, half to 2/3 of a teaspoon. And now we're going to go in with our soy sauce. If you're cooking with dark soy, like I am, we only need a few drizzles of it, nothing much. It is very strong. So if you see, I'm going to go really quick, and that's all I'm going to add. If you're using regular soy sauce, you might need to add just a little bit more. because it's going to not have that deep flavor. Stir that around. Last thing we're going to add are green onions. We're adding these at the very end because we want them to retain color, but also some of that fresh onion flavor. And friends, turn off the heat. There we go, that is our fried rice. I'm going to grab a bowl. Maybe. Cameraman, can you push that over? Thank you. Sprinkle with just a little bit more of our green onions. And friends, that right there is going to be lunch for my brother and I today. This is a frequent dinner that I have if I want something quick. You can see it hasn't taken us very long between me doing a lot of talking and just pretty much prepping some food and very little bit on the heat. We have a wonderful dish similar to what you might find in a takeout restaurant if you order what's called special fried rice here in America. You could add any protein, any vegetables, day-old rice leftovers. Go ahead, you're not really going out to grocery stores right now, see what you have in your fridge. We used half a carrot, about a quarter of an onion, 3 mushrooms, 1 small boneless, skinless chicken thigh, a couple cups of day-old rice, and we have our lunch. So thank you guys for joining me today. This is one of our Global Friday events. We'll have more every Friday leading up to the end of this semester as we're all working and studying from home. So I ask you to join us at any of our upcoming events. Keep an eye on our Facebook page. That's facebook.com/HPU Global Ed. Our website is highpoint.edu/global. You'll find upcoming events there. You can also find us on Instagram. A lot of events coming up, even while we're all at home. So thank you guys for joining me today. Stay connected with cultures, whether you're here or around the world, wherever that might be. Difference is beautiful. There's a lot we can learn from others. So I ask you to enjoy learning about the world and enjoy some lunch. Have a good day, y'all. Bye.